And I would like to welcome our fourth panel, Chairman Cole and Ranking Member DeLauro from the Committee on Appropriations. Please be seated at the witness table. Chairman Cole, welcome back to the
Always good to be back.
Rules Committee. We eagerly anticipate your testimony. We've been waiting for it all day. Gentleman is recognized.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Chairman Burgess, Ranking Member McGovern, and esteemed members of the Rules Committee, it's good to be back. I'm here to testify on the Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act of 2025. As we work the will of the House, responsible governance on behalf of the nation remains the priority. Everyone in this room is well aware fiscal year 2024 ends on September 30th. With this looming deadline before us, Congress is responsible to act. We are here today to ensure that the government remains open and serving the American people. The appropriations process is never easy. It requires time and hard work to complete. This year, we've much to be proud of given the constraints. After a late start due to the delay of fiscal year 2024 process and a late President's budget request, the Appropriations Committee succeeded in passing all 12 fiscal year 2025 bills out of the committee. The House then passed 5 of those bills across the floor, representing nearly 71% of overall discretionary spending. Despite this strong momentum, time is drawn short. The situation before us is not ideal, but neither is the reality of harmful disruptions to our national security and vital programs our constituents rely on. That's why a continuing resolution is needed. Today's bill extends government funding until December 20th. It includes extensions for critical programs that must remain in place, such as WIC, TANF, and the National Flood Insurance Program. It also includes additional resources for the Secret Service to ensure candidates and government leaders are protected, while also ensuring full cooperation of the Secret Service with congressional investigations. All in all, today's bill is a narrow and tailored CR that will allow us to continue government operations through the election. This path ensures Americans aren't needlessly punished with a costly shutdown and allows the people, and importantly the next president, to have a say in the appropriations process. Like most, my preference would be to pass full-year appropriations bills through regular order, but we're out of time. We cannot afford a shutdown, which would be greatly damaging to our national security, to critical government programs, and to the American people. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan measure. I thank each of you for your time, and I look forward to your questions. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The chair thanks the gentleman. The gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized as ranking member of the Appropriations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member McGovern, and the distinguished members of this committee, and to the chair of the committee. This continuing resolution will avert a costly and pointless government shutdown and will provide Congress with the time required to enact bipartisan full-year funding bills for 2025. We require a continuing resolution to keep the government open because House Republicans chose to write extreme and partisan funding bills based on Donald Trump's Project 2025 manifesto, 7 of bills which the House did not even consider because the majority knew they would not pass on the floor. Project 2025 is enormously unpopular with the American people, as are the deep cuts to vital public investments that House Republicans tried to force on the American people throughout this year. The majority did not learn a single lesson from the chaos Congress was dragged through to complete the funding process for fiscal year 2024. Until this bill, House Republicans had so far refused to meet Democrats at the negotiating table, despite the fact that appropriations bills cannot become law without the support of Republicans and Democrats in the House and in the Senate. That includes House Republicans' first ill-conceived 6-month continuing resolution, which thankfully was rejected by the House of Representatives last week, as we all knew it would. In this bill, I am relieved that House Republicans excluded partisan poison pill riders like the SAVE Act and abandon the disastrous across-the-board cuts that they have proposed in the past. It is never ideal to govern with a continuing resolution, but this bill is a responsible and a sober measure that avoids many of the problems that House Republicans would have created with a 6-month funding bill. However, this bill leaves a number of holes that the Congress must address by December in conjunction with completing all 12 full-year appropriations bills. As has been reaffirmed multiple times through the 118th Congress by Leaders Schumer, Speakers McCarthy and Johnson, the terms of the Fiscal Responsibility Act set our top-line spending level at 1% above where we ended up in March. Democrats will accept nothing less than 1%, and any increases in defense means that there has to be parity for non-defense. We know where we have to end up. It is my hope that this bill will provide the bipartisan momentum needed to get there. The House should pass this continuing resolution. Thank you.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back. I'm going to hold my questions till the end. I'll recognize the ranking member.
Well, first of all, thank you both for being here. And, I asked the chairman of the Rules Committee at the beginning of our hearing, like, why does the CR need a rule? I think that this sounds like you're in both an agreement on this CR. I mean, I don't know why we can't bring it up under suspension, as a suspension, because what I'm going to tell you right now is that if this is attached to the rule with all the other very partisan bills that we're dealing with in the Rules Committee tonight, then Republicans are going to have to carry the rule on their own. And I know that there are some on your side that will vote probably against the rule because they don't like the CR. So I'm not quite sure what this exercise is all about. Okay, there's a lot that I can say about Republican lack of ability to run this place over the last year, but I'm going to spare all of you from that because it would just be therapy for me at this particular point. But I do think that we just need to get this done, and then we need to get serious about a year-long bill. And so, in any event, you're in agreement, so I don't see this should be a quick meeting, I hope, but I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for questions.
Well, here we are. This is where I said we were going to be 3 weeks ago before the drama started. I said there would be some drama with the bright, shiny object called the SAVE Act. I said that was going to get stripped off and you were going to get a clean CR. I also predicted this would fall right before Christmas. And I believe this does fall on December 20th. Now, why have we picked December 20th? Because it's the same reason we always have December 20th. Everybody up here is human. There are no AIs or robots in Congress. And when you get to December 20th, you're 5 days from Christmas. You're 4 days from Christmas Eve. And you desperately want to be there with your family. So this is when the leadership here has the maximum influence. And again, I'm talking to the Democrats and the Republicans because you've seen it on the Democrat side of the aisle. They love to pick the week before Christmas for this showdown because you can smell the jet fuel fumes over at DCA. It smells like Christmas, that you're going to get to go home and open presents. I've been in HC5 when literally the Speaker of the House, not the Speaker we have now, walks in and says, if you vote for this, you can go home and unwrap presents with your kids, and if you don't vote for this, you're going to spend Christmas here with Nancy Pelosi. And then the chant starts, vote, 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 vote. Literally, people get enthusiastic to vote for something that they haven't read. So let me predict what we're not going to do on December 20th before I take a guess at what we're going to do. What we're not going to do, we're not going to do 12 separate bills. We are not going to spend this time. We've got a few months between now and December 20th. We could go back to working on appropriations bills. We are not going to do this. This sucker, whatever happens on December 20th, whether it's another CR to kick the can down the road for 3 more months, or whether it's an omnibus that funds all of government with with one bill. It's going to be written behind closed doors, and every lobbyist in this town is going to try to attach their little thing to this bill. This train is leaving the station on December 20th. It's the only one that we know is going to pass. They call it up here must-pass legislation. So everybody's going to try and get their little thing on this bill, whatever it is on December 20th, whether it's another continuing resolution or another omnibus. It's not even really a prediction that I'm making. I'm just telling you what has happened for 12 years, regardless of whether Democrats are in charge or Republicans are in charge. There may be a little twist. We may do half of a CR, it'll be a whole CR, and half of it will end in February, and half of it will end in April, and they'll convince you they got something more clever this year than they had last year. But it's going to be the same old thing, warmed over, written behind closed doors, rolled out here. We're not going to have time to read this thing. That's also predictable. And we're going to be told, vote for this and you can go home and open presents with your kids. Don't vote for it and you're going to be stuck here. And there will be people, it pulls at heartstrings. We are humans. And that's why I think it's really disingenuous or despicable, really, to pick 4 days before Christmas Eve to put this bill on the floor. The bill I'm talking about, obviously, nobody here knows what it is yet. And we're not going to have time to read it, but people are going to be inclined to vote for it because they just want to be with their family. I would encourage people not to vote for this CR. There's still time to do other things. This is not the 30th. And if we were going to do something, we should do a full year CR. Why do we want to set up a shutdown crisis the week before Christmas? Why would we even want to set up a shutdown crisis next spring? We shouldn't. We should fund the whole thing for a year. And what that would allow us to do is we could start working on, regardless of who comes into power, it would give you 12 months to work on the 12 separate bills. We could start working on those on October 1st. But we're not going to. We're not going to do any of that. We're particularly not going to have a CR that lasts more than 6 months because written into law, signed by Joe Biden, voted for by Chuck Schumer, but introduced by myself as a provision in law that says if you go past April 30th on a continuing resolution, you're going to get an automatic 1% cut to everything. Everything that's appropriated, not the mandatory, as they're called, programs. So that's why you're not going to get a CR that goes for a full year. That would, if you're going to do a CR, the most responsible thing to do would be a 1-year CR. But nobody up here can stand a 1% cut to spending. That would be like, back home, that sounds completely reasonable. But up here, that would be the end of the world to get a 1% cut. So that's why we're not getting a 1-year CR, which, if you're going to do a CR, would be the most responsible thing. And the reason you're getting a CR that ends December 20th is so you can pressure these members using their family, basically taking their Christmas hostage. And I think that's wrong, and I don't think we should do it. And I yield back.
Chair, thank you, gentleman. Gentleman yields back to gentlelady from Pennsylvania, is recognized for questions.
Thank you.
Or a statement, if you would.
Thank you. I do appreciate Representative Massey's predictions, which were shared by many here, that we would end up in this place after several weeks. Does the representative have any predictions on whether he'll vote for the rule or not? No predictions. Okay. I do want to express appreciation for the hard work of the chair and the ranking member. I know they do work very hard to produce bipartisan appropriations bills, and they've had some success with that before those bills have been loaded up with so many poison pills. They've collapsed under their own weight and been unable to be passed on the House floor. You know, this week we should be just working on one goal: to fund the government before the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. Americans don't want to hear more complaints or fighting. They don't want more culture wars. They just want to see Congress do its job. And at this point, a clean CR is the only sensible or responsible option, even if it frustrates some members of this committee or the Republican conference, because anyone anyone calling for a government shutdown is irresponsible. It's embarrassing that members of this chamber rely on these tactics. It's embarrassing that every single funding deadline is turned into a national crisis by House Republicans. If you can't agree to a spending deal by the end of the fiscal year, then at a minimum, you have to make sure there's more time to finalize a deal. But funding deadlines shouldn't be weaponized by extremists. That's not what deadlines are for, and that's not how negotiations work. In a negotiation, there has to be compromise, and if you don't get everything you want, well, flipping the negotiating table over is the response of a child, not a responsible legislator. So the hard truth is that the extreme spending policies and bills that the House Republicans have tried to force upon this Congress, the American people as a whole don't want them. And so that's not an excuse. It's never an excuse to force a government shutdown because one group failed to get its own way. So I'm glad that cooler heads have prevailed and that we have a pathway to fund the government this week. So I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for questions.
Yield back.
Gentleman has no questions. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you to both the chair and the ranking member for bringing us the CR for the negotiations. You know, I agree. It is unfortunate that we find ourselves in this situation. It is unfortunate. The many compromises that had to be made, as some of us feel we needed this in there, we needed that in there, but we will come back and we will have those discussions and in November and December. And hopefully, perhaps, even though it's the December 20th, there's always a possibility we could get it done before, right? Hope springs eternal, as they say. But I look forward to supporting the CR and heading back home to do the good work we need to do in our districts. And with that, I yield. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add? No?
Chair thanks the gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I thank the chairman. I won't add too much other than just a couple clarifying points. I actually generally agree with my friend from Kentucky, even though we disagreed last week on the position on the 6-month spending in the CR with the SAVE Act attached. But a couple clarifying points. I would support the full year CR. I think that would be a better approach. I agree. However, I do not believe it would trigger the 1%. It would trigger FY25 caps. I believe it would kick in place the FY25 caps. I don't know if the chairman agrees with that as the rough understanding, just for the record. I think that's correct. Is that right, Mr. Cole?
I think so.
Yeah. And then just to underscore, I think the point the gentleman from Kentucky made that I agree with, right? It was 2 years ago this coming December when we got a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill. Again, in that rough, I don't remember the exact date, but it would have been, December 22nd or 3rd or something, right before Christmas, if I remember correctly. And so that is, yes, the way things tend to be done. I think and I have very strong opposition to that, and have, been fairly forceful in my opposition to some of the senators that were a part of that effort and have voted against legislation that they've offered and so forth. Along those lines, because of how frustrating it was of what occurred in December of 22, which was, as noted, is the way we tend to do things. I would say this, that we had, last week, we did have a measure before us that would have gotten us past that date, that would have gotten us into the new year with a new Congress and a new president, and would have given us the opportunity to avoid the Christmas time frame, and would have enabled us to deal with the citizen voting issue. I still believe that was the right play, and the inevitability of ending up where we are was a self-fulfilling prophecy of killing a different approach a week ago. And so here we are, and we will now have a spending bill that will end in December. And on that point, I do agree with my friend from Kentucky, that is not where we should end up. And yes, we should do the appropriations bills. I would note we've passed 5 appropriations bills. There's been no appropriations bills passed out of the Senate. We could start with those 5. We could work on a handful of others. But but we're getting no support on the other side of the Capitol. So hopefully, we will work individual bills and/or do something like the gentleman said about a CR into or through next year, rather than a crazy, massive omnibus train, which is the inevitability of doing something right before Christmas, typically in this town, which I will strongly oppose, and will oppose this legislation on the floor as a result. I yield back.
Chair, thanks, the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just finish by saying that we have a $2.25 trillion deficit over the last 365 days. We're spending more money than we can afford to spend. That deficit, because of the interest on the national debt, I expect will get worse, not better. And so as we talk about the $35 trillion in debt, if you can't get control of the deficit, you're sure not going to get control of the debt. The thing where I have some respectful disagreement with some of my colleagues is I think whoever's elected president of the United States is going to ask for another 90-day continuing resolution. And I think that the exception to the 90 days is I think that there would be an agreement on defense spending because of all of the threats that are out there today that Democrats and Republicans on the relevant committees, both appropriations and the authorizing committees, see. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield.
Gentleman yields back, Chair. Thanks, the gentleman. Let me just, for clarification, Mr. Cole, I do want to ask you, I mean, mention that we passed 5 appropriations bills, but your committee has passed all of the appropriation bills required by law, has it not?
Yes, it has.
And none of that was done behind closed doors. That was all done as part of an open committee process, was it not?
That's correct.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify those 2 items. I have no other questions, and, the gentleman, no? Seeing no other member wishing.
Mr. Chairman, just one point, if I might make for
Don't risk it.
No, I want to talk about the date.
Don't risk it.
I'm not going to my view would have been for us to go on the December 13th. I know it's December, it's still close to the holidays, but I would wish that we had moved sooner. I think that.
I beg you not to do that.
Thank you.
I'm going to yield back, and seeing no other member wishing to ask a question, this panel is then excused.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman? I want to request unanimous consent to insert into the record amendment testimony from Representative Harder in support of amendments number 17 and number 20 to H.R. 8790.
Without objection, so ordered. Is there anyone else seeking to testify on H.R. 8790, H.Res. 1469, H.R. 3334, H.R. 8205, and H.R. 9747? Without objection, this closes the hearing portion of our meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
The gentleman from
Yeah,
Massachusetts.
I know you're closing the hearing portion, but when are we coming back? Oh, you're going to tell me?
Without objection, the committee stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair.